Before we get started, there are a couple things that you should take into consideration as it relates to creating your shoes. Your shoes should be built around the avatar that you want to wear them, whether that's the Clo avatars or your own custom avatars. Next, do not make the particle distance of your shoes too low. This leads to a highly complex mesh, and that may cause issues. Finally, consider adding a blank or dummy layer to your shoes if it is complex, and there is a chance it might cause problems when interacting with the garments when you drape or animate. We will see an example of this in the flat shoes, and then we'll review it again in the high heel shoes. So, let's get started. In this tutorial, we will be registering shoes in Clo. The shoes we have here have been created in Clo, specifically for the male version 2 avatar. We will also be using Blender to help us. The first thing we're going to do is we need to go to the UV editor, but I want you to take note of how these patterns are arranged here in the 2D window. I have arranged these very nicely so that when I go to the next step, these are easy to arrange in our UV editor. Go up here into our modes and choose UV editor, and this is what comes up. So what we want to do is to make sure that these all fit within this one UV, the 01 UV, which you can note by the red and the green lines that are here on these borders. I am simply going to marquee select these pattern pieces and put them right on top of the pattern pieces that are already in that UV. Now these are arranged so that I have pretty much a square layout, and you can bring them as close as possible so that they will fit within this area. Then I'm simply going to come here and marquee everything, right click and say fit to UV 01. This will scale everything up. I just want this to fit this within this area. I'm going to leave this on the settings that are here and click OK. All right. So now I'm going to delete my avatar. And now I'm ready to export these so that I can work on them in Blender. I'm going to come up here, File, Export, FBX. I have a folder saved here specifically where I want these to go, and I'm going to call these MV2, which is male version 2. That specifies the avatar that these will work on. Men's sneakers. And I'm going to add Clo at the end here to let me know that this FBX was exported from Clo, because we will be exporting an FBX from Blender. I'm then going to click Save. And this option box will come up. And all of these settings should be done exactly like this. Single object, thick, unified UV coordinates PNG. This should give you a default size here for the image size and the texture seams. Check diffuse and normal map. And finally the basic binary with this date, the scale, and then embed media. And click OK. So that takes a moment, and then we end up with this. So here is the folder where I have exported my FBX file, and then here are the textures that go with it. This is simply my Clo file that I built the shoes in, and these are 2 turntable videos I made of the sneakers themselves. Before we go over to Blender to help us create our shoes, I want to talk about creating a blank layer. This would depend on the complexity of the shoes that you are creating. In this example here, I don't use a blank layer, but if I did, it would look something like this. I will talk more about this when I create the high heels. So now we're here in Blender, and I'm going to simply click on the background here to clear the splash screen, and I'm going to go ahead and click in my scene collection over here to remove the cube. Right click, delete. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, Import FBX, and I'm going to now go to where I have the FBX that I exported from Clo. So here I have that file. I'm going to click Import FBX. And there are my shoes. And as you can see, it has the colored texture from Clo. This by default up here in your viewport shading toggle menu is display in solid mode. If you click here on display in material preview mode, then you should be able to see all of the textures, any graphics that you applied, and top stitch and anything else that you have in here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to select these sneakers here in the scene collection. Then I'm going to come here and I'm going to go into edit mode. Now what I want to do is I want to use my my views here to rotate so that I can see my two shoes straight on, and I'm going to click here on the viewport and select as wire edges. I'm also going to come over here in the face select, and I'm going to choose face select here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this shoe here, which is the wearer's left shoe. As you can see, the entire shoe, all parts of it are selected. While it is selected, I'm either going to go to the select or the mesh view here and say separate by selection, or I can also right click on the object and say separate by selection. What that then is going to do is it is going to separate the left shoe from the right shoe. I'm then going to go back here and just turn on the viewport shading and come out back into object mode so that I can see my two shoes here. Now I'm simply going to double click on these two shoes here and rename them. Very simply, you're going to rename them with lowercase shoes underscore R for the wearer's right shoe and shoes underscore L for the wearer's left shoe. Regardless of the shoes that you have, they should always be named shoes underscore L and shoes underscore R. Now I'm going to shift select so that they are both selected here. And I'm going to go to File, Export FBX. I'm going to put these in a specific place. Here are my shoes from Clo. I'm going to rename them here sneakers, and I'm going to call these white dash red, okay? And over here in the options, we're going to include here selected objects, and we're going to make sure mesh is selected only, and then we're going to uncheck apply unit. Then we're simply going to export FBX. And now we are finished in Blender. You can save this file here if you'd like, but that's completely up to you. So here we are back in Clo, and I have the project open where I constructed the sneakers. I'm going to use this avatar here since this is the one we started with. I'm going to delete all of the pattern pieces for the shoes. And now I'm going to come up here for where it says avatar, register hair and shoes. I'm going to choose shoes, obviously. These are flats. I am going to now open the dialog box to be able to find the men's sneakers that I made here. And here they are, sneakers, white, red. I'm going to click Open. I have a render of my sneakers, so I am going to apply that as a thumbnail. And then I'm simply going to say Create. And then it's going to ask you, where do you want to save it? You can save it anywhere that you'd like. I am going to simply save it in the same folder, and I will name it in the similar way, Men's version 2, Sneakers, White, Red, in case I want to make a new colorway later of different colors, and click Save. Depending on the geometry of the shoe, it may take a couple minutes for this to calculate. So now here, the general information, hair/shoes are complete. If you want to see where they are saved, you can open the folder. I'm going to simply close both of these, and then I'm going to go into where I have saved these shoes. And as you can see now in my folder here with everything else, there is my shoe accessory file. I'm simply going to double click on that pair of shoes. And then now here he is wearing the shoes, and I could go into my avatar, change his pose. So there we've changed the pose. I can put him in a running pose. And here is a quick animation that I made of Nate walking up the runway and showing us his shoes. Now let's do high heel shoes. There's a couple different things about shoes when you are preparing them to become registered in CLO. I would also like to show you this pair of shoes as well. As you can see, there is some detailing on the front of the shoes that is a little bit more complex. It's necessary here to cover this up with a layer so that, again, it does not catch when simulating or animating. So what we've done is we've created like a booty to go around this created shoe so that it covers the entire shoe. And what we will do when we export this as the FBX is we will simply make this transparent as we did in the other pair of shoes. When we export our FBX out of Blender, we're going to need to have a transparent file to place onto the blank fabric material. Let's switch over to Photoshop. In Photoshop, create a transparent document, an image that has no fill, no color, that is completely transparent, just like you see here, and save it. Call it transparency or transparency map. So let's start in CLO. Here is the project for our basic high heels. Okay, this is completely constructed in CLO. I will be using this pair of shoes for a forthcoming video about how to construct shoes. This is just about registering the shoes. And what I would like you to take notice of what is going on here in our object browser. We have multiple materials here. I have the fabric for the upper, which is the top part of the shoe. I have fabric here for the soles, which is just the bottom part of the sole of the upper. I have the heels here, which are completely separate from everything else. It's the same material in terms of the front of it. The back of it, I have made the heel, the texture, I've removed the texture, and I will also remove the normal map from the back and make the bottom of the heel just the same solid color that is on the sole. And as you can see, I have a material here called blank. Okay, this is something that you must do when creating a complex shoe. And when I say complex shoe, something like a high heel or a boot that has laces, or the shoe that you saw in the previous video. And the reason we need to add these in here is because if you use this shoe in an animation, when the avatar moves, any piece of the shoe that it might catch on a long pair of pants or a long dress or a long skirt, and these, what we call blank or dummy pattern pieces, will keep that from happening. So what I've simply done is made a pattern piece to fit both the left and the right side between the edge of the heel and the sole, and I've just created a white fabric that I will then change the opacity to 0. Now when I export this to Blender, this will come up white, but that's perfectly okay because we're going to be affecting this in Blender so that we can get it back into Clo. So here we are back in Blender. I have exported these from Clo exactly the same way I did the flat shoes in the previous part of the video. Let's look at a couple things. First, you can see that our blank fabric has now turned opaque. That's okay, we're going to fix that. And here in our scene collection, we have all the materials listed for everything that's going on. This is good. This is going to allow us to do what we need to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my shoes are selected, and I'm going to go back to edit mode. Now what I can do is I can select these materials here when I am in the material properties. I can select them one at a time and click the select button, and it will show me those materials. So what I want to do is I want to separate the blank from the heels and the heels and the blank from the upper part of the shoe. So this blank is good. I am just going to rename this blank so that I know that this material, I removed the random numbers that it gave it. I'm then going to click here and click select, and now this has selected all of the mesh that are connected to my heels. I'm going to then rename this to heels. The rest of these pieces can be combined. So if I go through and I select first this one, then this one, and then this one, this selects the rest of the shoe, the pieces of the shoe. This particular material didn't seem to do anything. So I am going to use this material as the main material for the entire shoe. So I've selected this one, and I'm going to click Assign. And then I'm going to change the name here to Heels Upper. Okay? Now, once I do that, if I deselect everything and select this and click Select, you can see that those pieces become selected. And there's our blank, and there's our heels. Okay? So what I'm going to do here, first I'm going to select, while I'm here, I'm going to select the blank, and under Mesh, I'm going to say Hide Selected, and you'll see why in a few minutes. I'm then going to go back to Object Mode. Okay? That's okay. I don't see that. I'm not worried about that right now. But what I'm going to do is I now don't need the rest of these materials, so I can delete them. Now, as you can see in the materials, you have 3 materials. It is important for creating heels that this heels material and the mesh it attaches to is at the bottom. So I'm going to select this, and I am going to move this to the bottom. Now, my shoe is already separate, but there is a chance that yours is not. So if yours is not, what you would need to do is to go into edit mode and get a good side view and click on the wire view in the viewport shading. And what you're going to do is you're going to select the heel in its entirety. Okay? And I'm going to use the selection here manually, and then I'm going to go under the select menu here and say select more, and I'm going to do that maybe one more time after that. And now my entire heel has been selected. And then if yours needs to be separated, what you would do then is assign the heels material to the mesh that you have selected to guarantee that this mesh is separate from the rest of the shoe. So now if I come back here and I go back to object mode and I go back to shaded mode, preview mode, I can select these pieces here and they will select all of the individual areas. Actually, I believe it's under edit mode. Okay, so the idea is that all of these pieces are separate. Most importantly, the heels from the upper, and then keeping the blank separate as well. I'm going to then now bring back my hidden mesh, okay? And what I want to do is I want to select, actually select the blank. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to go into the shading mode here. And I am going to make sure that I am selecting the blank material here in the shading mode. The shading mode can be very complex. We are going to go through a couple very simple steps just to do what we need to do to get back to Clo. The first thing that we're going to do is here in the properties, I'm going to click on this little dot next to this name, and I'm going to select remove the link. Okay, that is removing any of the UV maps that have been applied to just the blank part of the heel. Then I'm going to make sure that my color is now completely solid white. No hue, no saturation in value, and attributes or alpha is 1. Okay, so then your nodes should look like this. I can then delete these nodes here as well. I don't need these nodes here for what we're doing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to apply our transparency image that we created in Photoshop. And how we do this is we click again on this little button here, and we come across here and we choose image texture from the texture the texture menu. This image will open up. We're going to click on open, and we're then going to go to where we have saved our transparency image. Okay, I'm going to click that and click open. Oh man. Now once we've done that, we're then going to go to the base color again and click on the little node here, and from the texture menu, add image texture. This is going to allow us to add a new texture onto here, and this is where we want to put our transparency map that we prepared earlier. Not only do we want that to work with our base color, but we also want that to work with our alpha map here, and this is going to allow it to make our pattern pieces transparent. I'm going to switch back to object mode here, and then I'm going to scroll down here in the material properties, and under blend mode, the settings here under blend mode, it's going to say opaque. I'm going to change this from opaque to alpha blend. So then you can see now our pattern pieces are transparent. I can then come out of alpha or out of shading and go back to layout. Okay, and there is our shoes that are looking good so that when we send them back to Clo. There's one final thing that you might need to do. Now, my heels, if you notice here, if I go to edit mode, my heels are already separate. If you have created or imported an FBX where your shoes are all connected, you will need to separate the heels and make sure that they have their own material. So the way that we would do this is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the mesh that is the blank, and I'm going to hide that temporarily. So that here in the edit mode, I cannot see that blank area. I'm then going to click the X to get a good side view here in Blender, and then I'm going to turn on wire edges for my in my viewpoint. And I'm going to use the standard selection tool, and I'm going to select as much of this heel as possible, and I'm going to hold down Shift to add on to the selection, and I'm going to go as far as I can. Okay, I don't want to select any of the sole or any of the upper, so what then I'm going to do is I'm going to go to select and go to select more or less, and I'm going to do that a couple times so that the entire heel is selected. Okay, so if you had done that, if you did not have them already separate, what you would then want to do is assign the heel texture to that selection so that your heels are visibly separate from your upper. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to mesh, and I'm going to say, I'm going to reveal hidden. We can see in our edit mode that we can see all of our mesh. And if I go back to object mode and then to shading, we can see our shoe here. And the three parts of our shoe are now separate. Again, heels, blank, heels upper. And now we are at the point where we just need to create the left shoe and the right shoe. And you do that exactly as you did for the flat shoes. And you export them in the same way that you did the flat shoes as well. Then we go back to Clo. So here we are back in Clo, and we have an avatar in our window. This is Fei Fei. She's one of the version 2 avatars. I'm creating these shoes specifically for version 2. In the latest edition of Clo, all the female avatars are listed here, so I would be able to apply these shoes to any of these avatars. Just like with the flat shoes, I go to Avatar, Register Hair Shoes. I choose Shoes from here. Now I choose Heels, and this is where our setup comes into play. I then browse to where I have saved the FBX. There's my basic high heels. I click Open. If you'd like, you can add a thumbnail. I have the thumbnail here for the shoes from the project file, so I'm just going to use that as my thumbnail so I can see what it is, and then I click Create. It is then going to ask you where you want to save these. I did a previous version. I'm going to overwrite these and click Save. It takes a couple minutes with any shoe that's complex, so this may calculate over a period of a minute or two. Okay, here now it says hair shoes are complete. I'm going to close this and this. I'm then going to go into the folder where I have saved this shoe workflow. And so now here is our test heels. Okay, I simply double click here. If I've done everything correctly, there are our shoes. The blank area is in place. Okay. They came in matte here. I could select them and change this. These particular shoes are leather, so I'm going to change them to leather. And now what we can do is we can use not only our poses. Now that we have created our shoes for our avatar, I wanted to look at the shoes here in the Scene tab in our object browser. If you notice here, we have our avatar, the main name of the avatar, and if I go down here, I can come across the leg, the left ankle, and as you can see, we now have the shoes, shoes L and shoes right if we go down to the right here to the right foot. And as you can see, we have three meshes here. If I click them, there is our upper, there is our blank mesh, and there is our heel. And this is why we set the mesh up like this in Blender, because the heel must be the bottom mesh in the tree here so that Clo recognizes the heel when it registers the shoes. We can also use the motion files and have our shoes walk on the runway.